Okay, colleagues, it gives me great pleasure to declare open the Statutory Forum meeting, our second meeting of the Statutory Forum. As you know, this body was set up on our revised charter and was adopted by the Committee of Ministers in January last year. National governments are, of course, represented by senior civil servants in so-called steering committees. These committees discuss the follow-up to be given to Congress recommendations. I really do, colleagues, invite you as key members of the Congress, with you being heads of delegations, to actually establish a proper and regular contact with the representatives of your respective ministries, and especially with the members of the CDLR. This is also a very important duty for secretaries of delegations, and certainly our Secretary General, Andreas Kyiv, pointed this out to you in the delegation meeting with secretaries of associations. Another very important issue where your action is needed is in the preparation of the renewal of the Congress membership. We, of course, want to make sure that all levels of government are represented in national delegations, but not only that, but also that we have an equitable representation of the different structures of government as well. In some delegations, the Chamber of Regions only compromises members of regional parliaments and no members of regional governments. And I really would ask that this is looked at to have a much more balanced composition when looking at new members from your country. Today's agenda is brief, but does very much, I think, reflect the increasing role that you as heads of delegation are playing and should play within the future. We'll examine together in a few moments the positive developments following the Kyiv conference, and colleagues, to start this off, it gives me very great pleasure, as I said earlier, to introduce Baroness Hanham. Joan, it's very difficult for me to say this, having known you for so long in that sense. But as I mentioned earlier, the Baroness Hanham is the Under-Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government for the United Kingdom. And she has a very long-standing commitment to local democracy, served as the leader, we'd call it the mayor, but as the leader in UK terms of the London Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. Some of you already met her at the ministerial conference in Kyiv last November. She's also been having a series of bilateral meetings with a number of you here today as she goes about finding a consensus for the United Kingdom's chairmanship proposals for local democracy within the Council of Europe. So, without any further ado, you're very welcome to come and address us, and then address us on the podium, but then come and sit next to me. I think you'll feel more comfortable. Baroness Hanham, please. This is all just too long.
So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, first of all, very much, Mr. President and my friend Keith, for inviting me to come and spend a little time with you at this important meeting today. You've already heard from my Secretary of State, and I don't propose to go through everything that he has said. But what I do want to do is to underscore, if I may, the 5 elements that he was putting forward as the basis, perhaps, for a consensus of how we go forward with the Council of Europe and the various elements in it and the cooperation. Now, first of all, I have an apology to make, and that is that you will, I think, all have a paper from us, which is in English. And unfortunately, this was very much at the last minute, and we didn't have time to get it translated into French. So what I would like to do, if you will allow me to do it, is to read this paper, and then it can be translated for you by the interpreters, so that anybody who, and I'm sure there are not many here who won't understand it, but anybody who doesn't understand it will have an opportunity to hear the words rather than see them. And I hope that's acceptable. I'm afraid if it's not acceptable, I'm going to do it anyway, so that I feel that there's that we have an opportunity for a discussion. As you heard from the Secretary of State this morning in his speech to the plenary, we do want to engage constructively on somehow ideas of how we can discuss and take forward value for money ideas and make the Council of Europe even more effective. So the points that he put forward, the 5 points that he thought we should be discussing, and I think perhaps I need to emphasise this, that I do want this afternoon to have an opportunity to hear your views. Some will be critical, I accept that, but some, indeed, we may find a common cause, and I would like to feel that we can discuss these pretty frankly. So the paper says this: the chairmanship, after reflecting on the Lancaster House discussion, some of you were at Lancaster House, and after listening to the feedback it has received subsequently, offers the following ideas for moving forward to streamline activities on local and regional democracy, giving greater focus to these activities, to increase accountability to the European citizen, and giving greater value for money for the European taxpayer. Now, these ideas are not some fixed blueprint. They are, as I have said, for discussion and for everybody to become involved in, if they consider it appropriate, to work up and agree how to give them practical effect. The chairmanship is ready to listen to what people are saying and stands ready to help develop the practicalities. So the first matter that the Secretary of State raised was the implementation of the Chavez report. And that report and the recommendations which took place in Kyiv and were part of the Kyiv Declaration agreed at that place unanimously by local and regional government ministers and the Congress should be implemented as soon as practical. This includes the convening of a political high-level follow-up group involving ministers or state secretaries, having responsibility for local and regional government and members of the Parliamentary Assembly and the Congress. The second point, that we should try and agree across the bodies of the Council of Europe annual priorities. The implementation of the Chavez report paves the way for greater and deeper discussions between us all. The discussions should be used to agree, in an open and transparent way, as the Secretary of State stressed, a plan setting out the priorities each year for what needs to be done in the Council of Europe. This plan should make clear what governments are to do, what Congress is to do, and the Parliamentary Assembly is to do, and what is to be done jointly with an agenda in common. The plans should focus on activities where the Council of Europe can make a real difference to people's lives. Thirdly, that we should undertake activity efficiently and transparently. Once agreed by the Committee of Ministers, the delivery plan, which we will discuss, should govern all of the activities that take place in the field of the Council of Europe in that year, and the proposed activities. These activities need to be carried out promptly, efficiently, and transparently through effective management arrangements and to ensure accountability. Fourthly, that there should be an annual report accountable to the citizens of Europe. Accountability to citizens of Europe can be enhanced by offering a public report at the end of the year explaining what has actually been done and how that links up to the original agreed delivery plan. And finally, administrative structures which support the new approach. Administrative and budgetary structures should be put in place, delivering local and regional democracy activities in an open, transparent and accountable way. And these structures should incentivise value for money, support a strong focus on essentials, and create a culture of cooperation. So, ladies and gentlemen, those are the points in the paper, which I hope now that you've all been able to hear translated, and which I'm happy now discuss with you. I think I just would like to end by this, by saying, as a chairmanship, we don't apologise for putting ideas on the table. We think a constructive debate on them is healthy, and I stress that we are listening very carefully. But the simple fact of the matter is that we think, and that those at Lancaster House seem to agree, that there is a problem. There is a problem of duplication, coordination, and a lack of transparency. There is time and money which is wasted. As the Secretary of State said, reports that sit on the shelf. And at times, not everybody has agreed over who has the right to do or say what. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that is the proposition before you. And I think Keith is urging me to go and sit beside him. I'm not quite sure whether that's going to be a good idea, Keith, or not. But I should do that, and then I will ask him to lead the discussion. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, the first thing I need to ask you is that we formally agree to adopt the agenda. Is that agreed? Yes, thank you very much. Just let me remind you of some of the procedural aspects for this meeting. The deadline for tabling amendments was yesterday at 10 a.m, so that is gone. In terms of voting, only members of the Statutory Forum may take part in the vote. You've been distributed with cards, so if you've got one, you can vote. If you haven't got one, you can't. So if you want to take part in the debate, please raise your hand. You can also put your name down on the list of speakers here at the President's table as well, if you would like to speak. Now I would like to give the floor to Karl-Heinz Lamberts, who was present at Kyiv, and of course is chair of our governance committee, and one of the Congress members who was involved in the Chavez report, which of course is very much at the heart of these issues. Have I got someone wanting a procedural point or not? No? Okay. Karl-Heinz, please, the floor is yours. Yeah.
Monsieur le Président,
President,
Madame la sous-secrétaire d'État,
Baroness Hanham, Secretary of State. First of all, can I just say how interesting it was to attend the Kyiv conference. It was the 17th conference of its type, and it was an opportunity to I've often had to start things again.
Now it works.
Now you can hear the interpreting, yes? So it was a pleasure to have attended the Kyiv conference because it was a key gathering together of high-level representatives within local and regional politics from the 47 member states of the Council of Europe. This is the 17th conference of its kind. I've attended 3 such conferences, in fact, and on each occasion, I have to say, I had very good memories of what happened. I was there in Kyiv as a representative of Belgium, but I'm not taking the floor in this capacity. I've been asked to take the floor on behalf of the Governance Committee of the Congress. Now, what is perfectly possible, in fact, is that this 17th conference was the last of its kind in this particular configuration, because if you take a look at the overall context of reform in the Council of Europe, I think the link between the Committee of Ministers and the specialized ministerial conferences is one that's set to change over time. But be that as it may, the findings of the conference, I think, were very positive indeed, and before I get down to brass tacks and talk about exactly what you summed up so nicely, can I point out that in Kyiv we also talked about cross-border cooperation, we also talked about the consequences of the financial crisis for local and regional authorities, and we also, as a priority, in fact, tried to structure more effectively the European work being carried out with regard to local and regional democracy. The Chavez report is already quite a feat. It was the result of a number of discussions, of course, and for those of you that took part in these discussions, I'm sure you can imagine just how complicated it was. Otherwise, we wouldn't have taken so long on agreeing on the form and contents of the report. Mr. Chavez's report, I think, deserves quite some congratulations on our part for the clear nature with which it is written. And as has just been said, this is a starting point. It's not a climax as such, but as a starting point, it's one that gives us guidance as well. I don't think we need to look for the path that we should tread on. I think the Chavez report points the way for us. And what we now need to do is to go further on this. The reports should also continue to be discussed in the different national delegations, and this is why, of course, we're talking about this here, because this report covers, fundamentally speaking, the work carried out in each different country, which has its own specifics in terms of the relationships between national authorities, regional authorities, and local authorities. And this is therefore something that we, of course, need to give priority to in terms of the work being carried out by the Congress. I'm going to be as brief as I can, because you certainly don't need to apologise, I think, for flagging up 5 different areas. I think the work that you've carried out has been one which will prove to be of great use, because what you've done is you've summed up in 5 points what should now be done. This is also a feat in itself, because you could have summed it up in 100 points. I'm sure there had been enough information or substance for you to do this, but there are 5 key areas that you've highlighted, and I think we're on the right track. Let me just respond briefly to these 5 points that you mentioned. I'd like to underline as well that we've only become aware of this document today, but at least it's just in time. My first reaction to this would be quite a specific one, but not a definitive one as such. I think the Chavez report really should be seen as the starting point, and we should also establish in which high-level group this report should be included. This is mention is made of a high-level follow-up group involving ministers or state secretaries with responsibilities for local and regional government. But if we include 47 member states, then this will, of course, still be a high-level group, but it will be a far too big a group. With Mr. Chavez, we much more wisely thought of having a more select group in terms of numbers. So I think this is what we should give thought to here. Of course, there needs to be representatives from government. It will be down to government to decide who would attend, and there should be a few representatives from the Congress and from the Parliamentary Assembly, but perhaps not too many people, because otherwise I think it will become far too big a body, and we all know what sort of problems arise, even when there are only two people, but let alone when there are about 50. You were also talking about annual priorities. Now, I agree with having priorities, but what I wonder is, when we're talking about international work and all the constraints that it involves, whether it would be perhaps better for us to look at the working methods of the Council of Europe based on a 2-year cycle, a biannual cycle. I think this would be quite a good way of working, because a year goes by very quickly indeed. Within a national context, it goes by quickly, and in an international context, even more quickly. We could perhaps envisage there being a revolving system, if you like, where things are always moving, of course, but if we say that every year priorities have to be discussed and reviewed, this to me seems rather complicated to put into place, because once the discussion has ended on priorities, we'll already be next year, and then we'll have to start discussing priorities again. Efficiency and transparency, of course, that goes without saying. You can never be efficient enough and transparent enough, but what also needs to be done is to take stock of the specific context. It's not all that easy, of course, when it comes to transparency in each country, and the Council of Europe and its different structures sometimes have issues here too. So I think things should be presented in more slightly simplified fashion. We need to work in a way that we don't waste time on things that are less important than others. An annual report to citizens, well, I do agree with this, but in that case it has to be a report for citizens, because sometimes we all seem to think that when we draft a report it should interest citizens. My fear is that a lot of things that are said and a lot of things that are written really don't interest citizens all that much, and this is why, if we want to produce an annual written communication for European citizens, then we have to make really sure that the message that we want to get across is very clearly expressed, but it's certainly something we can try. And even more important than that, if we want to communicate in this way, we need to be very clear in the way in which we communicate on the different subjects that will be part of the agenda that we have. It's one of the main conclusions that we've been able to draw. The report covers 5 different subjects. It's certainly a very good starting point. In cauda venenum, as you say in Latin. But the 5th point is one that's an administrative-related one. Of course, this has been behind the large number of difficulties we've experienced for obtaining the results we want. The administrative structures, of course, need to be effective and efficient. That goes without saying. And this is also a subject where we can also come a cropper as well.
Si l'objectif serait
or come to grief. If this is what we're going to start doing again, to re-initiate discussions on structures which have just been reformed and just been approved within the Congress, and this reform, of course, is affecting the Council of Europe, Parliamentary Assembly too, then I think we'll never reach a situation in which we can come to a proper agreement. In my opinion, first of all, we need to call on everyone's goodwill. We need to very clearly identify different roles and responsibilities and call on all the different heads of the various administrative bodies to take on the proper responsibilities and to ensure that there are results. Cooperation needs to work properly, but I don't think we have to spend ages discussing structures again, because I do know what I'm talking about here, because I've been around long enough to have attended a number of meetings on this particular matter, and they haven't stayed in my memory as shining examples of European democracy since I've been working in these forums. But I think the most important thing, Baroness, is that as soon as possible we really need to start getting down to work. There are some subjects where we can demonstrate very clearly exactly what we've decided as a result of the Chavez report, and we can show that there are things being done, and in a year's time we can communicate things in this annual report to citizens of Europe, and that is the 47 member states of the Council of Europe. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Baroness Hanham, did you want to briefly respond to a couple of those points?
Well, I would like to briefly respond, because I think, first of all, I think it was, Monsieur Lambert, it was a very helpful contribution from you, and I think probably it's opened up some of the areas that we certainly want to look at. I want to make it clear from the outset that we see the Chavez report as the start, which Mr. Lambert has said, and not the end of this. I appreciate that Chavez was a report that was come to gradually, and that there were a lot of discussions before it was issued, but I'm also conscious that within it there are some very good ideas and thoughts, and that was, for those of you who weren't at Kyiv, that I think was the basis of the sort of agreement that came about. Just picking up one or two of the other comments that has been made. I hear what you say about the proposal that there should be a high-level political group, which is mostly ministers and secretaries of state secretaries. And I think we need to look at that to see what is the appropriate makeup of a group such as that. And it may be that actually the sort of governmental level is with input from the local and regional government, or it may be that that is not. But I think that is an area where we could come to a conclusion very quickly. The agreement of the priorities annually, I think, brings us really to what the structures might be. I absolutely accept that the Congress has got is the representative of local and regional government, but I do think, and certainly this was accepted at Lancaster House, if nothing else was agreed, it was agreed that there was duplication and there was, in many stages, lack of cooperation and coordination, and to some extent that was very expensive. Because if you're doing things twice or nobody really knows what somebody else is doing, it costs money all the time. And the Secretary of State said this morning there isn't a lot of it about, and so we want to make sure that we get the maximum benefit from it. So the sort of structure that I think we would be looking at would be a meeting, a high-level meeting of government, Parliament Assembly, Committee of Ministers, Congress, to form the programme, so that each would decide what they wanted to do and then discuss it and make quite clear and understand that that wasn't being done by any of the other elements, that there was a clear focus and responsibility for delivering one aspect of those priorities. And it would be then on, and it may be right, Mr. Lambert, that annually may be too much. You need to construct a two-year programme, and I think that's something that we could discuss. And the annual report, and I agree again, it has got to be for the people who we all represent and all serve. It needn't be very long. It needn't be very detailed. But what it should do is to say, this is what we have been doing. This is the action we have taken. These are the recommendations we have, or this is how we see the future going forward. And I don't think, I mean, certainly in the UK now, we are starting to open up everything to transparency. We issue reports that go straight onto the internet, and there's very little now that is behind the screen, and I think, and I'm sure that's true of many of you here, but I think it's good practice. And finally, the administrative structures which support a new approach, that will develop. I guess as work goes on. Again, I keep on coming back to the money because I think it's something which strikes us all very hard, that we absolutely need to make sure that the budgets that we are using in the Congress, Parliament, Assembly and the government are being used to the maximum effect. Now, there may be changes that need to take place as a result of looking at that, but again, it's something that we need to discuss and which we would want to look at and discuss with you closely.
Thank you very much. I've got one or two speakers who I know have indicated they'd like to speak. You have 3 minutes each, speakers, to participate. First on my list is Mr. Mikulev. Yeah, please.
Well, thank you, Chair. I try to be brief as possible. Well, Baroness, the report by Mr. Chavez is entitled Council of Europe Towards a Multi-Level Governance. And the emphasis throughout the document is how to apply the multi-level governance concept effectively in our organization. For us, the strength of the current architecture of our organization is based on there being separate political instances representing different levels of government. Our challenge, obviously, is to make these political bodies work more closely together and to coordinate more. May I ask whether you would agree that the political autonomy of our respective bodies should be the starting point, because we have been speaking about the starting point being the Chavez report. My question is, would you consider that the political autonomy of our respective bodies would be the starting point for us to forge closer links? And if you don't mind, going directly to the Chavez report itself, the report lists 5 priorities. And I'm going to, just for the benefit of my colleagues, first, monitoring the impact of economic crisis on local and regional government, strengthening citizens' democratic participation. Thirdly, developing the concept of multi-level governance. Fourth, promotion of human rights at all levels. And fifth, transfrontier cooperation. Having been close to the work of the Congress, I believe that the Congress is prepared to work on these proposals as from now. Do you consider, or rather, when is the presidency ready to start off discussing and implementing these proposals rather than speaking on the development of new structures?
With respect, I don't think I mentioned new structures. I think what I did say specifically was that the structures, that we recognised that there were the 3 elements of structures within the Council of Europe, and that the Congress represents regional and local government, and I wouldn't want to disturb that. But I think the Chavez report was, we picked up a bit of what Chavez was leaning towards, and I think he was very clear about the coordination and cooperation in terms of the work that is done. And I hope that what I'm doing is to emphasise that we think that there can be better cooperation and between the Council, the Committee of Ministers, the Parliamentary Assembly and the Congress in terms of the work that is done, so that it doesn't need to be an overlap, that the emphasis of what is done clearly relates to each particular element, and that there's a clear understanding, again I go back on the money, that there is a budgetary restraint on this. So I don't think I'm at difference with you at all, and I think that what we have been trying to do, or are wanting to do, is to build on Chavez. Now, you ask when are we ready to go? Well, we have been ready to go from day one, when the Prime Minister made his speech originally. We've had the meeting at Lancaster House, on which we put forward a strong paper on what we thought should be done. And it is fair to say that there wasn't consensus in Lancaster House entirely. The only consensus there was, that was absolutely clear, was that there needed to be some change in the way coordination and cooperation took place. And that was and we're ready to go. My coming and talking to you today and the Secretary of State being here, I hope is an indication of that. And I am ready to talk to anybody who would like to put forward to, and I'm ready to come to meetings if that would be helpful. So between us, we can perhaps forge a way of making sure that the best elements of Chavez are implemented and that we are able to take forward our presidency and priorities.
Thank you. Mrs. Romanova, 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, President. I would like to address my gratitude to the Baroness for your participation in the Kyiv conference. We consider you to be a friend of the Congress, as we can say to Today we listened to the Secretary of State. We're having the opportunity to exchange views with you. I have a series of questions for you. Now, all these reforms are the start of a process follow on from the Chavez report, but what's important is that we preserve the positive aspects which we have today. And for us, it's extremely important with our responsibilities here at the Council of Europe. We consider the Congress to be a unique institution. It is unique because of the people who are members of this body, our experience. We are elected representative. It's a great opportunity for us to exchange experience, to help us construct democracy in our Europe. Now, of course, the mission of the Congress has changed, but our main target is to achieve results. And really, the Congress has an added value to bring, a contribution to make when it comes to monitoring. It's the same when you're talking about trans-border cooperation. This is also a very important area of work for the Congress. What for me is of paramount importance is that when it comes to resolving issues here within the Council of Europe, when we're looking at coordinating our work, that we maintain the unique nature of the Congress as one of the pillars of the Council of Europe. And I think we need to be very careful in the approach which we take to the work, and we need to maintain the Congress's position, because here we've got a great deal of history. The Congress has evolved in the institution which it is today. So I'd be very interested to hear from you. I know this is a complicated issue. You've got the budget issues related to this, but would like to hear from you the importance of maintaining the unique nature of the Congress within the Council of Europe. I want to hear from you that you're going to say, yes, we're going to protect local authorities and local self-governance. Thank you.
Mrs. Mösler-Turnstrom, please.
Thank you. Baroness Hanham, my question affects better standards or value for money. Much of the Congress work, such as its monitoring activities, as my colleague also mentioned, focuses on improving standards in local democracy across Europe. On the basis of the political autonomy of the Congress, which makes recommendations on the Committee of Ministers. The UK Chairmanship has emphasised the need to get better value for money, better value for taxpayer. Do you think that these two aims can be successfully combined, or will we have to sacrifice one to achieve the other?
The final speaker will be Mr. Carey, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Baroness. Just 4 points, really only 2. It's concerning what, to me, is a breakdown in communication. A breakdown in communication between the parliamentary members of the Council of Europe, me and my colleagues, the local authority members of Congress, and much to my surprise, the documentation I got here about the meeting in London, the list of participants, I discovered that one was the permanent representative of the Council of Europe in Strasbourg, and the other was a assistant principal in the Department of Environment. I know both men, but the principal assistant has never contacted me once in the past 2 years, which I think is ridiculous when I know him and he knows I'm here. And I meet the ambassador, who has the courtesy to meet us when we have a meeting like he's meeting us tomorrow. But apart from that, I think it's ridiculous that those 3 tiers have never been in touch with each other. And I feel left out, you know, that I'm missing out due to more cooperation and lack of cooperation and contact with them. And the other point, it was mentioned this morning by, I think, Mr. Pickett, someone complained about recommendations that we make get no further, you know. And he said, and I knew what his answer was going to be, that they are only recommendations. But until such time as our recommendations are given, you know, strength and they're adhered to and implemented, I think we're going nowhere. Sorry if I seemed critical, but that's just my opinion.
Thank you very much. Well, can I just say that I know there's a number of members who wanted to speak, haven't been able to speak. Can I suggest that if you want to have a reproduction for the summary record, that you hand in a typed contribution to room 6046. We've completely run out of time. The Albanian ministry is already waiting for us.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. Very briefly, I won't do that. Probably I didn't listen clearly to the rules which are applicable, then it's my own fault. But I'm somewhat taken by surprise by the fact that the paper which has been claimed to be produced is now spoken aloud by the Baroness, and I have not been able to be prepared, and I'm not able to react. Very honestly sad. That is not my idea of fairness, and certainly not value for money. And that's all what I have to say.
Okay, well, I think you've made a point. I'm going to come back to Baroness Hanham to respond, please.
Can I respond to the last point again? I did apologise I think he may have left.
Well, yes, but that is fairness. When you are delivering somewhat, and I'm not in a position to be prepared, and I'm not in a position to react. That is not fairness.
Okay, I think we got the point. Oh no, you've made it.
Certainly got that. Just very briefly, because I appreciate that we are running out of time, could I first of all say to Madame Romanov, thank you. I enjoyed Kyiv enormously. I thought the Ukrainians did us proud in terms of that conference. And no, we are not trying to undermine Congress in any way. I think I hope I made that clear. We recognise that Congress represents local and regional government, that it's invaluable, perhaps particularly to the new states who are coming in, for the support that it gives and for the development of those states. But what we do see, and it has been touched on again, we do see that there is room for a better coordination between the three elements, not threatening any of those three elements, but asking them to work more closely together. And I think the point that has just been made about the fact that one element doesn't seem to speak to the other and the representative just really bears out what I say. I think we have got to have, particularly with policies and practicalities, we need to have a better on that. And I just finished by saying I want to thank you all very much. I hope that anybody who gives a typed contribution will be sent to us, because it's extremely important. I am very much committed to working on this during our chairmanship. I would like to feel that we can move forward in agreement quite quickly, because I think one of the things that happens with any proposal and any proposition of policy is if you don't get a move on with it, it gets lost in the welter of a changeover of chairmanships in due course. So Albania, I know, is very much behind us and will work with us. But, Mr. President, thank you very much for inviting me to come. I know the Secretary of State was very pleased to be here this morning. I've met quite a lot of you during the course of the last few months, and thank you again. I look forward to meeting more of you in the future.
Well, thank you very much. There will be an opportunity to discuss further in the Bureau, of which Mr. Van Wilhuizen is a member. I am now going to adjourn this
Mr.
meeting.
President, I'm sorry, but I didn't get an answer at all.
Well, I'm sorry you haven't had an answer. I appreciate you haven't had an answer, but that is not my, I can't take that any further now. I'm afraid I have to adjourn the meeting. Apologies to Mr. Scard that we stand adjourned on the election procedure for the Secretary-General point. We are behind. We're keeping the Minister from Albania waiting, and I now have to adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance, and thank you very much for your contribution, Marilyn.